They say that in any long-term relationship, you build a shared reality. It's a world with its own rules, its own language, its own comfortable, predictable weather patterns. For years, my wife and I lived in that world. I'm Ezra Allen, 38 years old, and until recently, I believed the weather in my world was perfectly stable. My wife is 36, and she was the sun in that stable system. Our life was a quiet rhythm of work, shared dinners, weekend projects, and the easy comfort of knowing someone so well that you can finish their sentences. It was a good life, a life built on trust, or so I thought. In that shared world, there are landmarks, objects that become part of the landscape so familiar you almost stop seeing them. For us, one of those landmarks was an old tea tin. It sat on the highest shelf of the built-in bookcase in our living room, a silent green and gold sentinel watching over our lives. It was a vintage tin from Fortnum and Mason, the kind of thing you see in old British movies. The paint was slightly faded, with a few tiny scratches near the lid from decades of use before it ever came to me. It wasn't just a tin, it was a piece of my history. It was my grandmother's. I have this one crystal-clear memory of being a little kid, standing on a step stool in her kitchen, the air thick with the smell of brewing Earl Grey. She'd lift that tin down from her own high shelf, and the faint puff of fragrant air that escaped when she opened it was like a magic spell. She kept her most prized loose-leaf tea in there. After she passed, it was one of the few things I asked for, not for its value, but for the weight of those memories. When I brought it home, my wife understood. She helped me pick the perfect spot for it, a place of honor where it wouldn't get jostled or used for anything mundane. It became a pure object of sentiment, a ghost of a memory made solid. And for years, that's all it was. It sat on that shelf gathering a thin film of dust that I'd wipe away every few months, a silent testament to a time and a person I missed. It was so much a part of the room that I stopped noticing it, the way you stop noticing a tree outside your window. It was just there, part of the stable weather of our world. The first sign of a storm, the first hint of a low-pressure system moving in, came about a week ago. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesday is her late night at the office. I usually have dinner waiting for her when she gets home. The routine is always the same. She walks in, drops her keys and bag in the little ceramic bowl by the door, and I meet her in the hallway for a hug. It's our little ritual, the anchor point at the end of a long day. That night, she came in looking tired, a little frayed around the edges. I met her in the hall, as always, and wrapped my arms around her. And that's when I smelled it. It was faint, almost imperceptible, and so completely out of place that my brain took a few seconds to even process it. It was the smell of cigarette smoke, not the fresh, acrid smell of a lit cigarette, but the stale, clinging ghost of it. It was woven into the fabric of her winter coat, a scent that didn't belong in our world. I'm a non-smoker, always have been. My father smoked 2 packs a day for 30 years, and I watched it slowly steal his breath away until he was gone. I'm not militant about it. I don't lecture people, but the smell I know intimately. It's a smell I associate with loss, with hospital waiting rooms, with the slow, deliberate act of self-destruction. And it was on my wife's coat. I pulled back from the hug, my mind racing. I tried to keep my voice casual, tried not to let the alarm bells ringing in my head show on my face. "Hey," I said, "rough day?" She nodded, running a hand through her hair. "The usual. Meetings that could have been emails, you know." I hesitated for a second, then decided to just ask. Maybe there was a simple explanation. There had to be. "You smell like smoke," I said, trying to make it sound like a neutral observation, not an accusation. She paused just for a fraction of a second, but I saw it. A flicker in her eyes. A tiny, almost invisible tightening around her mouth. Then she laughed, a breezy, dismissive little sound. "Oh, yeah, there was a whole group of people smoking right by the bus stop. I probably had to stand in a cloud of it for 10 minutes. Gross, right?" And just like that, she offered up a plausible reality. A simple, logical explanation that fit neatly into the world we knew. We live in a city. People smoke at bus stops. It was believable. It was reasonable. So I accepted it. I nodded, forced a smile, and said, "Yeah, that's the worst. Come on, dinner's ready." We ate dinner. We talked about her day, about my day. We watched an episode of some show we were binging. Everything was normal. The weather was stable again. But it wasn't. Because even though I had accepted her words, my senses were telling me a different story. The seed of suspicion had been planted. For the rest of the week, I found myself watching her. Not in an obvious way, but I was just more aware. I'd noticed the way she'd immediately change out of her work clothes the second she got home. I noticed she was carrying mints in her purse, which was new. I'd find reasons to get close to her when she came back from running an errand trying to catch that scent again, but I never did. I told myself I was being paranoid. I was turning a simple, everyday annoyance standing next to a smoker at a bus stop into a conspiracy. This was my wife, the person I trusted more than anyone, the co-architect of our shared world. To suspect her of lying to me felt like a betrayal in itself. It felt like I was the one cracking the foundation. The doubt was a bitter taste in my mouth. I started to question my own senses. Maybe I had imagined how strong the smell was. Maybe I was just overly sensitive to it because of my father. I tried to push it down, to bury the suspicion under the weight of a decade of trust and routine. I almost succeeded. I almost convinced myself that the strange, unsettling feeling was all in my head, that the single faint smell was an anomaly, a rogue data point that meant nothing. I chose to believe in the world we had built, the one where the weather was always predictable and the landmarks never ever moved. I chose to believe her, and that I would soon learn was the calm before the storm, the deep, quiet breath the world takes right before it's torn apart. That Saturday, the house was quiet. My wife was out for the afternoon meeting, up with a friend from college she hadn't seen in a while. At least that's what she told me. A week ago, I would have accepted that information without a second thought. It would have been a simple fact, a piece of data that explained her absence. But now every statement felt like it had a shadow. Every plan felt like it could be a cover story. The seed of suspicion had not only been planted, it had taken root and was sending out insidious little tendrils that were wrapping around every corner of my mind. To fight it, I decided to clean. Cleaning has always been my therapy. When my thoughts get chaotic and tangled, imposing order on my physical surroundings helps me feel like I'm regaining some measure of control. It's a simple, tangible process. You take something messy and you make it neat. I started in the living room, dusting surfaces, vacuuming the rug, arranging the books on the coffee table into a perfectly aligned stack. I worked with a methodical, almost frantic energy, trying to scrub away the unease that had settled over our home. Our living room has built-in bookshelves that flank the fireplace. They're filled with a mix of our paperbacks, a few photo albums, and a collection of knickknacks we've accumulated over the years. My side is mostly history books and biographies. Her side is novels and poetry. On the top shelf on my side sits a single ornate object that's more decoration than anything else, a vintage tea tin from Fortnum and Mason. It's a beautiful thing. Deep green with intricate gold lettering and a royal crest. It's heavy in a way that modern packaging isn't. It feels substantial, permanent. It was my grandmother's. She was this tiny, formidable English woman who drank Earl Grey tea at precisely 4 o'clock every afternoon until the day she passed. She kept her special loose-leaf tea in that tin. After she was gone, my dad gave it to me. He knew how much I'd loved sitting with her during her tea time as a kid. The tin didn't smell like tea anymore, not really. But whenever I looked at it, I could almost conjure the scent of bergamot and the memory of my grandmother's quiet, reassuring presence. It was a piece of my history, a sentimental anchor. It had sat on that shelf untouched for years. We'd dust it, we'd move it to clean under it, but we never opened it. There was no reason to. It was an heirloom, a silent monument to a person I missed dearly. As I was dusting that top shelf, my hand brushed against its cool metal surface. I paused. I looked at the familiar green and gold, the elegant script. On a whim, a sudden, inexplicable impulse, I picked it up. Maybe I was just feeling nostalgic. Maybe surrounded by this cloud of doubt about my present, I wanted to connect with something certain from my past. I ran my thumb over the lid. For a second, I thought I'd just put it back. What was the point? It was empty. It had always been empty, as far as I knew. But I didn't put it back. I held it in both hands, brought it down from the shelf, and carried it over to the armchair by the window. The afternoon sun streamed in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I sat down the tin, resting on my lap. It felt heavier than I remembered. Or maybe I was just paying more attention. With a gentle tug, I pulled the lid off. The seal was snug, and it made a soft, metallic sigh as it came free. And then my world stopped. It wasn't empty. My brain didn't process it at first. The image my eyes were sending, it was so completely alien, so profoundly out of context, that it just refused to compute. It was like seeing a fish in a bird cage. It was wrong. It didn't belong. Inside the tin, nestled against the metal bottom, was a standard king-sized pack of cigarettes. The brand name was one I recognized from the hazy days of my father's habit. Next to it, held together by a simple paperclip, was a tight, neat roll of cash. I could see the edges of the bills, greens and beiges, a 20 on the outside. I just stared. For a full 10 seconds, I did nothing but stare into the tin, my mind a complete and total blank. The air in the room seemed to get thick and heavy, hard to breathe. The quiet of the house was no longer peaceful. It was suffocating. The sunlight hitting the floor seemed harsh and interrogating. Then came the smell. It wasn't the ghost of bergamot from my grandmother's tea. It was the faint but unmistakable scent of dry, unburnt tobacco. It was a clean, slightly sweet, and deeply sinister aroma. In that instant, a connection was made in my brain. A circuit that had been open was suddenly violently closed. The smell in the tin clicked together with the stale, smoky smell on my wife's coat from a week before. Click, the dismissive laugh. There was a whole group of people smoking right by the bus stop. Click, the new pack of mints in her purse. Click. The way she'd been changing her clothes immediately after getting home, dropping them straight into the laundry hamper. It wasn't a rogue data point. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't paranoia. It was a lie. A careful, constructed, plausible lie designed to misdirect and reassure me, while this secret world in a tea tin existed right under my nose, in my own living room, inside a memory of my grandmother. My hands started to shake. I gently, carefully placed the tin on the table next to the chair. I felt like I was handling evidence at a crime scene, because that's what it felt like. A violation, a betrayal that cut so much deeper than I could have imagined. This wasn't just about smoking. If she had come to me and said, "Ezra, I'm stressed out of my mind and I've started smoking and I'm ashamed, but I need your help," we could have dealt with it. I would have been worried, I would have been disappointed, but we would have faced it together. That's what a marriage is. But this was different. This was a conspiracy. This was deception planned and executed over a period of time. She hadn't just hidden the habit, she had built an entire infrastructure to support it. That's when my eyes went back to the roll of cash. With trembling fingers, I reached into the tin and lifted out the money. I slid off the paperclip. The bills were crisp. I started to unroll them and lay them flat on the table. A 20, another 20, a 10, a 5, another 20, on and on. They were mostly smaller bills, the kind you get back as change or from an ATM. I smoothed each one out my mind, working furiously. Where did this come from? We have a joint checking account. All of our money goes in there. We pay our bills from it. We buy our groceries from it. We have a shared budget that we talk about every month. There was no line item for secret cigarette fund. I finished counting. I counted it again just to be sure. $210. Exactly. $210 siphoned away from our shared life, a little at a time to fund this secret. This wasn't a recent slip-up. This was a long-term calculated operation. The level of premeditation was staggering. Every time she'd gone to the grocery store and gotten cash back, $10 here, $20 there, it wasn't for a coffee or a quick lunch. It was for this. It was an act of financial infidelity, a quiet, systematic theft from our partnership. And the hiding place. That's what felt like the final twist of the knife. She hadn't hidden it in her own jewelry box or in the pocket of an old coat in her closet. She had chosen my grandmother's tea tin. She had taken this thing that was mine. This object, connected to a person I loved, a symbol of warmth and family and trust, and she had turned it into a lockbox for her lies. She had contaminated it. She had made it ugly. I sat back in the armchair, the $210 laid out on the table in front of me, like a losing hand in poker. The pack of cigarettes sat there beside it, a stark white monument to her deception. I felt a wave of emotion so powerful and conflicting, it almost made me dizzy. There was a hot, white-hot anger at the sheer audacity of the lie. There was a profound, aching sadness for the trust that had just been shattered into a million pieces. And underneath it all, a cold, terrifying dread. The woman I had married, the person I thought I knew better than myself, was capable of this. This level of secrecy, this depth of deceit. The foundation of our world, the one I had so desperately tried to believe in just a few days ago, had cracked. Now sitting in the quiet of my living room, staring at the evidence of her secret life, I could feel the whole structure beginning to crumble. A storm had been raging just beneath the surface all along, and I had been completely, blissfully, stupidly unaware. I knew with a chilling certainty that settled deep in my bones that nothing would ever be the same again. The only question left was, what was I going to do about it? For a long time, I just sat there staring at the money and the cigarettes. My first impulse was to scream, to just wait for her to walk through the door and unleash a hurricane of accusations and hurt. I imagined the scene throwing the money at her, holding up the cigarettes, demanding an explanation. I could already hear her responses. The denials, the excuses, the gaslighting. She'd say it was old, that she was holding it for a friend. She'd say the money was from something else, that I was being paranoid, that I was controlling. The fight would be about my reaction, not her actions. She would twist it, turn it, and by the end of it, I'd be the one apologizing. I knew that script. I'd seen it play out over smaller things. This time, the stakes were too high. A shouting match wouldn't fix this. It would just entrench the lies deeper. No. A direct emotional confrontation was what she would expect. It was a battlefield she was comfortable on. I couldn't win there. I needed to do something different, something quiet, something undeniable, something that addressed both betrayals, at once the lie about her health and the theft from our future. My anger began to cool, replaced by something much colder and clearer, a kind of surgical precision. This wasn't a crime of passion she had committed. It was a series of cold, calculated decisions made over a period of 5 months. My response had to be the same: calculated, deliberate, final. I looked at the $210 spread across the table. Our money. Money that was supposed to go towards groceries, towards a vacation, towards fixing the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom, money for our life together. And she had secretly repurposed it. She had decided unilaterally that this money was better spent on a habit that could one day leave her and me devastated. And that's when the idea sparked. It was so simple, so perfect, it was like a key turning in a lock. The money was the fuel for the secret. The secret was the cigarettes. The cigarettes led to a lot of terrible places. But one place in particular stood out. I thought about the commercials you see late at night. The grainy photos, the sad music, the people speaking through voice boxes. I thought about the pamphlets in the doctor's office. I thought about the human cost of the very thing she was hiding in my grandmother's tea tin. The problem wasn't just the smoking. The problem wasn't just the stolen money. The problem was that she was using our shared resources to actively harm herself and our partnership. So I would use those exact same resources to fight back. Not to fight her, but to fight the consequence of her secret. It was a kind of poetic justice that felt profoundly, unshakably right. I stood up. My hands were steady now. The trembling was gone. I carefully gathered the bills from the table, stacking them into a neat pile. I put the $210 in my pocket. I walked over to my desk in the corner of the living room and sat down in front of my computer. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the quiet clicking of the mouse as I woke the machine from sleep. A plan had fully formed in my mind, a plan that would make any denial, any excuse completely and utterly impossible. It took me less than a minute to find the website. The homepage was filled with stories of hope and loss of research and advocacy. It was the website for the American Lung Cancer Foundation. Their donation page was simple and direct. "Give a gift today," it said. I clicked the button for a one-time donation. A small box appeared on the screen waiting for a number. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. This was it, the point of no return. I typed in the numbers: 2, 1, 0, point, 0, 0, $210. The exact amount. I entered my name and our address, using our shared credit card to process the transaction, knowing full well the money siphoned in cash would be more than covered by our next joint deposit. This wasn't about the specific dollars and cents anymore. It was about the principle. It was about reclaiming the value of what was taken. I clicked Submit. A confirmation screen appeared. "Thank you, Ezra Allen, for your generous donation." I took a deep breath and printed the confirmation receipt. The ink was still warm as it slid out of the printer. It showed the date, my name, the organization's name, and the amount, $210. It was a simple piece of paper, but it felt as heavy as a stone tablet. It was the truth. It was the consequence. It was the end of the secret. I walked back over to the coffee table. I picked up the pack of cigarettes. I didn't open it. I didn't break them. I just walked them into the kitchen and dropped the entire unopened pack deep into the kitchen trash can, burying it under some coffee grounds, out of sight. Then I returned to the living room and picked up my grandmother's tea tin, the beautiful vintage tin that she had turned into a vault for her deception. I opened the lid. It was empty now, a hollow space where the lies used to live. I folded the donation receipt neatly in half and then in half again. I placed it right in the center of the tin. Then I closed the lid, the soft metallic click echoing in the silent room. I put the tin back in its place on the shelf exactly where it had been, a trap perfectly set. All I had to do now was wait. She came home a few hours later, right on time. The sound of her keys in the lock made my heart pound, but my face remained a calm, neutral mask. She walked in, dropped her bag, and gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. "Hey, hun, long day," she said, just like any other day. The sheer normalcy of it was chilling. I just nodded. "You hungry?" I asked. We made small talk. We discussed our days. We moved around the kitchen, preparing a simple dinner. It was the most surreal, tense performance of my life. Every normal word, every casual gesture felt like a lie. The whole time I could feel the tea tin on the shelf behind me radiating a kind of cold energy. It was a silent witness waiting. After dinner, as we were clearing the plates, she said it. The words I had been waiting for. "Oh, shoot! I need to run to the store real quick. I'm almost out of shampoo." She paused. A tiny, almost imperceptible hesitation. She needed cash. She was going for the tin. "Okay," I said, my voice even. I didn't turn around from the sink. I just listened. I heard her footsteps cross the living room floor. I heard the faint sound of the tin being lifted from the shelf. I heard the lid click open. And then I heard silence. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was a loud, heavy, suffocating silence. A silence filled with confusion and then dawning realization. I slowly dried my hands on a towel and turned around. She was standing there by the shelf, the open tea tin in one hand, the small folded piece of paper in the other. She had unfolded it. Her face was pale. Her eyes darted from the paper to the empty tin, and then finally to me. The mask of normalcy was gone, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated shock. "Ezra," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "What is this? Where's the money?" I leaned back against the counter, crossing my arms. The performance was over. "What money?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "The $210 you've been skimming from our joint account for the last 5 months?" Her jaw dropped. The color drained completely from her face. She knew. In that instant, she knew that I knew everything. The smoking, the lies, the systematic withdrawals. The receipt in her hand wasn't just a receipt. It was a confession. Her confession written in my name. That wasn't your money. I continued, my voice calm but hard as steel. It was our money for our life, and you were using it to fund a secret that is actively trying to shorten that life. So I reclaimed our misused funds. I pointed a finger at the paper in her hand, and I redirected them. I put our money towards fighting the very thing you were buying in secret. I gave it to the American Lung Cancer Foundation. You can see the confirmation right there. She just stared at me speechless. All the denials, all the excuses she might have prepared were useless. They had been surgically removed from the equation. There was no room to argue. The evidence was absolute. The power of her secret, the thing that had allowed her to operate this hidden life right under my nose, was gone. It had been exposed, dismantled, and its funding had been terminated. In that moment, the victory wasn't about being right. It wasn't about punishment. It was about clarity. It was about breaking through a wall of deception that I hadn't even known existed a day ago. The fight that followed wasn't the screaming match I had initially feared. It was quiet and raw and painful. There were tears. There were admissions. The truth finally came out, but the dynamic was forever changed. The secret was dead. The financial mechanism that enabled it was destroyed. All that was left was the two of us standing in the rubble of the trust she had broken, forced at last to have the honest conversation we should have had 5 months ago. The war was over, but the long, difficult work of rebuilding had just begun.